Welcome to RichPlanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall and welcome to the 2011 Christmas show. And I'm delighted to be joined by the Port and the Pub.
Hi folks.
Otherwise known as Phil Atherton. And many of you may recognise Phil from his poetry.
Yep.
And the poems that I've inserted into the shows, they've had a very mixed reception. People either love them or they detest them.
Yeah. Well, some of those poems have changed. I mean, the ones from the first DVD were more, well, they were more sexual.
Right. Now
they're more political, still also sexual.
Right.
Please buy the next one. And they pull more punches. I suppose in some programs you had serious debate, and then you had a poem about hemorrhoidal discharge.
Yeah.
Fair enough, that doesn't fit.
Yeah,
I remember seeing that one.
A lot of people say that to me, it doesn't fit. But, you know, when I was devising the show, one of the things I was trying to aim for was I didn't want people to know what to expect for every show. I wanted it to be unexpected.
Yeah.
But so what we've decided to do, because it doesn't fit, is we're possibly going to make another show called The Port and the Pub's Guide to Life.
Yes.
Tell us about that, Phil.
Well, this will be culled from my forthcoming book and e-book, The Guide to Life, which will, it's basically my guide to life.
So
love, the universe, serendipity, happiness, creativity, and lots of other stuff I only know half
stealing food
about.
from skips.
That's not stealing.
Right.
Well, it depends if the skip's on private land.
Yeah.
But there's going to be none of that because I can't do it anymore.
Right.
Most of the new supermarkets lock up their waste.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know that it's quite a big thing in the. Well, I've seen various TV programs about people who can almost live purely on waste, like the things that supermarkets throw out and that kind of thing.
Oh,
Which is one of your philosophies, to live on as little money as possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And other ways, barter and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's certainly things you can barter for food and things you can barter from, for food from farmers or such like.
All right, Phil. Now, we come on to the austerity measures, which is loosely linked. And in the news this week, we had Jeremy Clarkson. Well, first off, we had the strikes, the public sector strike, national strike. And then we had Jeremy Clarkson make that remark where he said, all these public sector workers should be shot.
That was actually gratuitous, I thought. If you look at the reaction from the other two, from the two presenters, they weren't expecting it at all.
Right.
And what he said after about how people who commit suicide are selfish, that is really unforgivable.
Right. I'm not really that bothered by it. I mean,
he's looking for publicity for his book, it's his sound bites for his new book.
As I was saying off camera, I think, as I do with many things that are in the media and blown up in the media, I think there's another agenda. On the radio phone-ins on that day, I heard on the BBC, Radio 2 and local BBC radio, the debate was, these public sector workers get paid enough, so how dare they strike? I'm a private sector worker and I'm not on strike and I get paid a lot less than them, I haven't got a pension like they have, etc. What I think they've done, and I think this has been done deliberately, they've made the debate about that, rather than what the debate should be about, which is about the corrupt fractional reserve banking system, which has created the problem that we're in.
The deliberately manifested recession. Before we go into that, can I just remind everyone that Jeremy Clarkson is a public sector worker to the tune of almost £1 million a year, paid for by your licence fees money.
Yeah.
that is the
well,
biggest
I mean, yeah,
arch hypocritical, you know.
Yeah, if he's working for the BBC, which he does, that's public sector, isn't it?
Absolutely, he'll have a gold-plated pension.
Yeah, a gravy train.
Stuck to that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But as I say, it's for me, it's diversion. It's and I actually think that those phone-ins on the BBC, if you've ever rang them, you ring up and they say, "Can I ask you what your question is?" And you tell them the question, and then they say, "Okay, give us your number and we'll ring you back." So that means they can then steer the debate to whatever they want. So they make the debate about, let's make it public sector versus private sector. Come on, let's face it. Public sector workers are essential. Private sector workers are essential. You make a decision when you leave school, don't you, Phil, what your route's going to be. And there's pros and cons in both of them. You know, public sector, you've probably got more security. Private sector, it's probably say high risk, but you've got the potential of earning a lot of money. So there's pros and cons in both. They're different and they're both essential. So to make the argument, I call it a phony bone of contention. Yeah. They create a phony bone of contention and get everyone fighting in that bubble, when the oligarchs who are really in control, they're not asking the right questions about the corrupt banking system. Right, now that we've sorted that one out. Yeah. About a year ago, I think, David Cameron announced this thing called Big Society. You were going to make a comment on that, Phil?
Well, he gave us a clue of how to beat his big society. If we can do what he says and get together and organise ourselves, we can be too big a society for him and bring about his downfall. Right. So we need 50,000 signatures, and then he faces a vote of no confidence.
Right.
And because this is a non-government with no mandate, I think that's the next thing to be aiming at, apart from teaching ourselves about common law and the finer points. I mean, you only have to buy a law dictionary for a couple of quid from the web or whatever, just firstly to find out what the terms are, the legalese rather than English terms, and the best thing, it's the only way we can empower ourselves. I'm thinking of studying common law a couple of years. It's either that or do my MA, which I'll get 2 years pay for doing that anyway. That's more to do with communications. But I'd like to do common law, you know, at least part-time, so I can learn enough.
Yeah, viewers may not be aware that, but I was actually in the same class as Phil here in junior school, and how he came to be on the show was I stumbled across
old school ties.
No ties here. I stumbled across Phil's MySpace site, and I hadn't seen him for 24 years. So I was reading his poems, and I happened to find them extremely amusing. So I set myself a quest to go and find him. So I'd heard his name mentioned in a bar in concert in County Durham. So I went trailing around all the bars that Phil goes to and eventually managed to find him.
Yeah, it's just about all I belong to. I don't belong to any groups, or I don't go to the sports centre.
Right, yeah.
It was quite easy to find us.
Yeah. They rename them now. They call them Centre for Sport now.
Oh, is that right?
And they call youth clubs academies. You know all these different names and things. Yeah. So are you a fan of social networking, Phil?
Not really.
No? I mean, you've got a MySpace, haven't you?
I have got a MySpace. That was only for my own promotion. You know, I suppose I have Arsebook and them. Those are mainly for my own promotion.
Arsebook. That's your word for Facebook.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to breach their trademark.
Right. Right. And you said you were having problems posting material on there because of copyright or something.
That was MySpace since it changed around.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff that was all originally there, like some old videos, were booted off automatically every time MySpace changes hands.
Right. Right. Can you remember the one? I think it's still going. Friends Reunited. Have you bumped into anyone on there?
I'm on it. I think there's no more than one sentence on it.
Right. Okay. I went on there quite a few years ago. I think it was about 2001, and I got so sick of reading people's profiles. Every person in my class at school is a marketing director or you know, consultant of some hugely successful firm. Every one of them. In fact, everyone in the whole school is.
Well, I didn't say I was a success. I said I was a copywriter, which is my trade. But actually, you know, I mean, I'm squeezed out the market by Indians and Ukrainians and all this.
Right.
So I get hardly any copywriting work.
Right. I got so sick of these, what seemed to me to be fake success stories. I wasn't going to write one myself, so I actually put on there that I'd passed away, and I wrote kind of a little obituary there, and so there's probably quite a lot of people who go on there and think I'm dead.
I was afraid to do that in case I upset some of the wrong people, but yeah. I thought you were dead.
Yeah. I mean,
this is why I was so surprised by your email message.
Right. Well, there was one lad who was in our class, Andrew Gales, they call him. He'd been away for a lot of years, and he thought I was dead.
I think that's the first 4 words I said to you. Aren't you actually dead?
Right.
It was something like that.
So he came across my sister, this Andrew Gales, and he kind of sort of said, oh, I'm sorry to hear about your brother. And my sister was, you know, what's happened to him? Oh, he's dead, isn't he? So that caused a bit of a problem. Yeah.
It's a good job you hadn't seen your own. It's a good job you had seen your own sister and like, you know, hadn't seen her for a while in case you thought the worst. Yeah.
Now let's take a quick scan of some of the events from 2011. Being this is be the second last show of 2011. Have you been following any of the Islamic sort of alleged revolutions? I mean, there's obviously things going on in those countries now, whether they're genuine revolutions or whether they're coups or what have you. And it seems to be kicking off in a lot of countries.
Well, Libya really was the biggest disgrace of all. You know, that was a country where you didn't pay for your gas and electric because they had them. You know, everybody had hospitals. Iran also had more women in university than men. I think Libya did. No, I think Iran had more. I think Libya it was about the same.
Right.
But the literacy in Libya was way into the 80%, maybe more than 85.
He's a dictator, and I don't think anyone agrees with the philosophy of having a dictator. No one would. But there were a lot of positive things about Gaddafi, you know, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
you know.
well, certainly, I know he employed soldiers from other African countries, but that was the most stable country in Africa.
I think it was becoming sort of the Switzerland of Africa, if you like, kind of the jewel in the crown of Africa, and it was going to possibly create a United States of Africa. That's what Gaddafi wanted. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they...
Oh, that irrigation plan. Absolutely amazing that was.
Right.
Irrigated most of the land. Man-made irrigation. Incredible. Very, very good.
I've noticed you've got an empty glass there, Phil.
Oh, yeah.
You care for
I've got
a Christmas beer?
Very nice. Lovely.
Seeing as it's a Christmas show, and when we're...
the end of my antibiotics. Gonorrhea free. For the rest of the month, anyway.
So, Phil, I've written down some of the notable things that happened in 2011 here. What we had in, when was it, May, the death of bin Laden, or alleged death of bin Laden. What do you make of that?
The changing, well, the paradigm shift, really. I thought Osama bin Laden was supposed to have died, when, 2001 or 3, it was cancer or something.
Yeah.
And now the BBC is admitting that Al-Qaeda never actually existed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even the BBC, it was, I can't remember, it was a Panorama, one of their documentary programs, because I don't even watch TV. I haven't even got a license, you know, I don't even want one.
I mean, I find it amazing that they can pull off something like that, the bin Laden thing, and people actually believe that they killed him. This guy, this Dr. Steve Pieczenik, who's supposedly a reliable source, and he's got connections with the CIA, he's been government advisor for years, he said in 2002, I think it was, that he died in the end of 2001, and he said what he died of. The fact that they've never produced any evidence of bin Laden's supposed execution. You know, Saddam they did, Gaddafi obviously they did. Why would people believe it? They just believe what is printed. This is what I don't find it amazing that they're doing these things, because we've had 9/11 and 7/7. What I can't understand is how they get away with it. Why people can't look at that and go, hang on, did they really kill bin Laden? The people don't question it. You go out to the street or the pub, which we probably will after this, and ask and say, well, bin Laden's been dead for years. They think you're mad.
Oh, absolutely. But that, I mean, that's the product of the hegemony of information control, because I do believe it's an information war, and we are fighting one. And eventually the trickle-down spoils of it all. Now nobody knows what to believe, because even the BBC has said, I'm sorry, it's been a sham all these years.
Those of you who watched the interview that Phil and I did a little while back will realise that neither of us are monarchists, so I guess you're not going to be watching the Queen's speech on Christmas Day, Phil.
I haven't got TV.
Right.
I've never listened to it in my life.
Right, because those of you who are monarchists and who watch the Queen's speech, just listen to this. This document defines who can be who has the right to be on the throne. Whether you this is the conditions. Only Protestant heirs of Princess Sophia, granddaughter of James I, may succeed to the British throne. Neither Catholics, nor those who marry a Catholic, nor those born out of wedlock may remain in the line of succession. Now, I would contend that monarchy is, by definition, racism.
Yeah, church became state, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is racism. What is race? Race is a bloodline. If you are racist, you favour one bloodline above another.
Yeah,
so that
absolutely.
is saying that you can't be and you can't have the rights of a monarch if you're not in that bloodline.
Well, it's certainly not allowable under EU law, is it?
See, for that reason, on principle, I would get rid of monarchy.
Well,
purely on
EU
principle.
law overrides UK statute law anyway.
Right. So
if not common law, definitely statute law, which I think is what applies to the monarchy
now,
in this case.
What monarchists and royalists say in answer to that, they first say, well, what other system would you propose? No other system's better than that. That's the first thing they say. And the other thing they say is, well, they don't have any power. They can't do anything. So what's the problem?
They own us. They own this whole country. They own, I mean, you think you own your own house, but if the Crown wants it, they can just claim it. They own everything.
This is the thing.
And we are just indentured slaves to them.
The fact that...
That's the way their law works.
This is an illusion that's perpetrated, the fact that they have no power. This
Yeah.
is what all of the, I would suggest, the propaganda is. It's to make you think that, so that you will then support them.
They bring tourists in, blah, blah, blah. But they are spearheading United Kingdom corporations' interests, the City of London corporation's interests. Note the difference.
I mean, I'm not saying string them up by the ghoulies or anything like that.
I'm saying just get rid of them.
Just
certainly
phase them gradually out. Just let them peter out.
Well, if you consider, it's estimated that 40,000 long-term taxpayers may die of hypothermia this year for fear of heating their houses up.
Right.
And then they may actually die, even though they have played this country by the book from day one.
Now,
that's a bit of perspective for you.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of inequality. All right, Phil. Well, we're going to go for a break. After the break, I'm going to screen some of the rants of 2011. We are observing this today with the creating of currency as debt by central banks and people like David Cameron coming out with his classic bullshit lines like, we need to deal with the deficit and we're all in this together. No, we don't need to deal with the deficit, David, and no, we aren't all in this together. We need to get rid of the Bank of England, thus allowing our government to create sovereign currency itself, instead of borrowing it at interest from the Bank of England. The current financial crisis is not an accident. It has been carefully engineered by those following the principles similar to the ones set out in this document. Some call it financial terrorism. The document states control of the public is achieved by engaging their emotions, increasing their self-indulgence and their indulgence in emotional and physical activities, by unrelenting emotional affrontations and attacks, mental and emotional rape, by way of constant barrage of sex, violence and wars in the media, especially the TV and the newspapers, giving them what they desire in excess, junk food for thought, and depriving them of what they really need. Rewriting history and subjecting the public to the deviant creation, thus being able to shift their thinking from personal needs to highly fabricated outside priorities. The general rule is that there is profit in confusion. The more confusion, the more profit. Therefore, the best approach is to create problems and then offer the solutions. In entertainment, keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. In the media, keep the adult public attention diverted from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Are we not seeing this on our TV screens every day with the barrage of television shows of no real importance? For example, the plethora of dancing shows. Strictly Dancing, Ballroom Dancing, Disco Dancing, Dancing at Night, Dancing on Ice, and the soon-to-be-launched Dancing on Shite, where the contestants will hopefully fall flat on their abundantly maked-up faces. Of course, these shows are really not dancing competitions. The contestants' rippling bodies strut about, wiggling their bottoms in kinky, sexually explicit outfits, like prostitutes competing for your attention in a sleazy strip joint. Just as some of our tabloid newspapers are actually soft porn mags, thinly disguised as newspapers, these TV shows are the same. They are soft porn shows, thinly disguised as dancing competitions. In the past, I remember the show Benny Hill, which was of course soft porn, thinly disguised as a comedy show. Now, on the Rich Planet Starship, we have no objection at all to anybody wishing to spend their time watching pornography. We are not prudes. We are not the modern-day version of Mary Whitehouse. Just as long as those who insist on watching this tat understand exactly what it is they are glued to and why. As my physics teacher always used to say, the easiest person in the world to fool is yourself. Then we come on to the other area of no great importance, which is paraded on our TV screens every second of the day, programs about food. I don't know about you, but I'm no more interested in watching TV shows about eating food than I am in watching TV shows about having a dump. Although that probably would make a far more interesting show than the shit we are served up every day on our lie boxes. As Andrew Johnson said to me the other day, the BBC, making ignorance fashionable. Well, I think I'll just remain unfashionable if it's all the same to you. On the 21st of February, I went to Wandsworth Prison to visit Muad'Dib, also known as Anthony John Hill. As of today, the 4th of March 2011, he has spent over 140 days in prison and has not been convicted of anything. Muad'Dib lives in Ireland and in 2007 produced a very compelling film called 7/7 Ripple Effect. The film casts huge doubt on the official story of the 7/7 London bombings of 2005 and shows quite clearly that the alleged suicide bombers were probably innocent and most likely set up by intelligence services to take part in a mock terrorist training exercise by playing the role of suicide bombers. Incidentally, several other films have also been produced casting massive doubt over the official story. None of these films have been shown on mainstream television. A terrorist drill was taking place at the exact locations and the same times where the supposed suicide bombs were detonated. The evidence points to a false flag terrorist attack organized by the authorities who planned the terrorist drill. Yes, you heard that right, folks. Our own intelligence services, who are supposed to protect us, are perpetrating acts of terrorism and murdering their own people. Let's just say that again for anyone who didn't quite catch it. Our own intelligence services, who are supposed to protect us, are perpetrating acts of terrorism and murdering their own people. And one more time for luck. Our own intelligence services, who are supposed to protect us, are perpetrating acts of terrorism and murdering their own people. The evidence which supports this statement is abundant, which is why the authorities have dodged an inquest into what actually happened on 7/7. The current investigation into 7/7 is not an inquest into what happened, and is not an inquest into whether the alleged bombers were guilty. It is a complete smokescreen, where certain evidence is not being allowed into the court, such as the clearly doctored single frame of CCTV footage put out by the authorities to try and place the alleged terrorists at Luton train station at a particular time. The alleged terrorists were not even on the tube trains when they blew up. Do 10 minutes of research and you will find that at least 2 of the alleged bombers were murdered by police marksmen near Canary Wharf because they missed the train at Luton and were late for the mock terrorist training exercise they had agreed to take part in. I hear you saying, but the BBC have been covering the inquest and have put out information about the events in their news. There is no doubt these men were on the trains. Let me clarify this point. The BBC has put out lies, lies, and more lies about the 7/7 bombings. For those of you still clinging to the notion that Islamic terrorists perpetrated this act, here's a little factoid for you to chew on while watering your pot plants. At the current so-called 7/7 inquest, the authorities have not provided any clearly recognisable CCTV footage of any of the alleged terrorists at King's Cross or any other tube station, platform, walkway, or on the tube trains themselves on the day of 7/7 before the explosions occurred. Let's just repeat that so it sinks in. The authorities have not provided any clearly recognisable CCTV footage of any of the alleged terrorists at King's Cross or at any other tube station, platform, walkway, or on the tubes themselves on the day of 7/7 before the tube explosions occurred. Now, there's quite a simple explanation for this, and we're having a little competition to ask viewers what the explanation might be. Is the reason A, all CCTV cameras on all the relevant tube trains, platforms, escalators and walkways weren't working? B, the alleged terrorists were not at King's Cross until after the explosions? Or C, life is an illusion and we are all manifestations of our own consciousness and the world doesn't actually exist? Answers on a postcard to the RichPlanet Starship, Do You Think We Were Born Yesterday? Who Are You Trying to Kid? P.O. Box, Slap My Thigh with a Large Banana. The winner will receive a Starship bullshit annunciator so that you can press it whenever the BBC News comes on. Now, you might be sitting thinking, no, I did see a CCTV picture of one of those guys at a tube station. I'm sure the BBC showed it. 3 years after the bombings, a very dubious, unclear CCTV sequence was produced at the Kingston trial, which the BBC have used repeatedly. The sequence does not show any faces and is considered by some to have been fabricated and timestamps added. Now, some of the alleged bombers went on a trip to London 1 month before 7/7 and visited the London Eye. They were caught on CCTV at that time, shown here on this recognisable CCTV image. Compare this with the only CCTV sequence of the alleged bombers on the morning of 7/7 at King's Cross before the bombs went off. If these men were actually there would be multiple instances on many different cameras, including images on the tube trains of the men's faces, similar to this image, but there are none. World events have been moving at such a pace in the last few weeks, it's been difficult to digest them at the rate they are happening and make sense of it all. But here's my slant on it so far. The bald-headed Ponce Foreign Secretary William Hague is the puppet who has been saddled with putting out government spin about the supposedly unforeseen world events which have been unfolding recently. I wouldn't trust him to change a plug, never mind deal with world events. Anyway, let's start with the Islamic uprising or awakening in North Africa and in the Middle East. Initially, following the Tunisian and Egyptian uprisings, I was suspicious about whether these revolutions had been triggered deliberately. The well-practiced methods which the CIA have used in the past to plant agent provocateurs in other countries to stir up the shit and make it look like public unrest when it is in fact all done to manipulate the situation to their intended outcome, i.e. replacing a leader with one of their puppets, as described by ex-CIA operative John Perkins. Perhaps this is how it all started. I don't know. None of us know. But since other countries seem to have followed suit, it seems very unlikely that the knock-on effect happening now has been orchestrated. Western powers were rubbing their hands with glee when they saw that Libya too had seemingly kicked off. A great chance to get rid of that evil man, Colonel Gaddafi. The powers that be seized on this, but before taking any military or direct action, they put out their propaganda to demonize Gaddafi in our tightly controlled media. The front page of The Sun suggested that Gaddafi was responsible for the Lockerbie bombing. Let's correct that mainstream media lie straight away. Neither Gaddafi nor Libya was responsible for Lockerbie. The Libyan man, Abdelbasset al-Megrahi, who spent 8.5 years in prison for assisting in the preparation of the bomb, was let out of prison in August 2009 on compassionate grounds because he supposedly had terminal cancer and supposedly only had 3 months to live. He's still alive, by the way. Something which is often conveniently ignored about al-Megrahi is that he was awaiting an appeal hearing to challenge his original conviction, which was widely expected to conclude that it was, to put it mildly, an unsafe conviction. Witnesses are alleged to have lied and been coerced at the original trial. This would have been a massive embarrassment for both Britain and America, so they most likely fabricated his cancer illness and let him out of prison to avoid the hearing. People who were in prison with and knew Megrahi all say he is innocent. Nevertheless, our mainstream media still used the Lockerbie bombing to demonize Gaddafi, before the government then started suggesting military action may be necessary to get rid of him. The very slimy Malcolm Rifkind said, "He thought we should be arming the rebels." You know, whenever I see young kids fighting in the street, I always think the best way to split up the fight is to arm the rebels. Give them knives and watch them tear each other to pieces. What a tit that man is, Rifkind. But Gaddafi has murdered his own people. He's an evil dictator. Well, it may come as a surprise to some of you, our authorities murdered 56 of their own people in the 2005 London bombings. The word hypocrisy springs to mind here, but more on that later. It was reported in our media that during both the Libyan and Egyptian uprisings, the internet was pulled by the evil regimes. Really? Not sure I believe that one. Show me the evidence that it was the regime that shut their internet down, and I might believe it. There are other parties, notably those who seek to control Western media, who might also not want the truth getting out of these countries via YouTube. I remain on the fence on that one. People say, but people want democracy in Libya. This is about spreading democracy. Really? Other countries in the region experiencing considerable unrest, with protesters calling for their non-democratic leaders to take a hike, are Yemen, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. In Wikipedia's Democracy League table of 167 countries, Bahrain is in position 122, listed as an authoritarian regime. Yemen is at position 146, listed as an authoritarian regime, and Saudi Arabia scores worse than Libya and Iran at position 160, listed as an authoritarian regime, 7th bottom of a table of 167 countries. Why isn't Malcolm Rifkind wanting to arm the rebels of Yemen, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia in their fight for democracy? The seventh bottom authoritarian regime, Saudi Arabia, even sent its own army to Bahrain to assist the Bahrain authoritarian regime in killing its own people to stop them protesting. So come on, Malcolm, why aren't you wanting to arm these countries' rebels to fight for democracy? The answer is simple, because these regimes are backed by the US and subservient to America's foreign policy goals, while at the same time oppressing their people in a variety of ways. Our spineless puppet leaders like Rifkind, Haig and David Cameron are the biggest brown noses of the American regime you can find, and quite happy for countries to remain at the bottom of the democracy league table as long as the dictators oppress their people and support the US's goal for world domination. Hypocrisy, hypocrisy, hypocrisy. Well, Malcolm Rifkind, you think we should be arming selected sides of selected countries when it was us that sold arms to the other side in the first place? There's a few arms I wouldn't mind using on you, you slimy, empty-headed waste of space coward. Rifkind, of course, doesn't actually have any power. He has been told to say these words by those other cowards who manipulate things from behind the veil. A few weeks ago I mentioned some extremely important CCTV evidence which was ignored at the recent inquest and shows that there was an operative of some kind working with the alleged bombers. Somebody driving a dark-coloured Jaguar was filmed on the 28th of June on the morning of the alleged bombers' dummy run, and on the morning the actual bombs went off on the 7th of July. The Jaguar was parked in the same place on these 2 days, and it arrives on the morning of the 7th of July in the car park shortly before the second alleged suicide bomber's car arrives. Although the authorities have removed certain sections of the video, it is clear that the person driving the dark-coloured Jaguar is part of their team. It is likely that this person was the alleged bomber's handler. That is, the person responsible for directing them in their part in the operation. Can you believe that neither the police, nor our media, nor inquest want to know who was driving this car? This is a key piece of evidence which may well link the four men to an intelligence-organised plot. Why haven't they released the missing footage? Why aren't they attempting to trace the driver? Why not put it out on their Crime Watch UK programme? Some have suggested the driver may have been Peter Power, who was organising the mock terrorist training exercise that morning. Again, I'd like to appeal to viewers who know of Peter Power. What type of car was he driving in July 2005? I've also got here the lineage, or the
lineage, yeah,
of the throne. So we've got Prince Charles is next in line to the throne, Prince William, and then we've got Harry Hewitt.
Oh, yeah.
Prince Harry, who you have named Harry Hewitt.
Yeah, well, it was me. Yeah, it was my friend who gave him that sobriquet, but it's not such a sobriquet. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, I mean, to me that's my technical name for him.
For those viewers who don't know what you're talking about, tell us why he's called Harry Hewitt.
Well, it's debatable as to who his patronage. Is patronage the right word?
Not really
Father
sure.
is.
Yeah. So yeah, there are rumours.
The right word, no.
There are rumours that Prince Harry's real father is James Hewitt. Now,
well, at least insofar as he is supposed to have confessed to this under hypnosis.
Just
yeah.
Take a look at that, Phil.
A few years later.
Just watch. Watch the mic. Now, but I thought it was widely known that Diana had an affair with James Hewitt. Is that not public knowledge? You can't get done for libel for saying that, can you?
Well, no, not now that she's dead. You can say what you like.
No, but like you might be libeling him.
You have to be careful about him, yeah.
But hasn't he admitted it?
He admitted it under hypnosis a few years later, I think 1985, 1986.
But does he not admit it not under hypnosis? I thought he did.
He may have, and it had then been covered up.
Right. I'm sure he did.
Oh,
see, I thought the whole argument was people say he can't be Harry's father because they were messing about 9 months after he was born, not 9 months before.
Ah.
Now, just take a look at that image.
Yeah, well, what we've got here is we've got Charlie Boy on the right here. And we've got Harry Saxe-Coburg Hewitt on the left here. Now, consider, here's a pint of lager. If I get half a pint of Guinness and pour that in, it doesn't turn out ginger colour. It doesn't turn out the same colour as my hair, does it? It's going to change out dark brown. I mean, I've got the red gene. Harry Hewitt's got the red gene. I mean, that is
Harry's got
absolutely distinctive. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So
I mean, he's a strawberry blonde here. I don't know whether he's got highlights, but
I doubt it. I doubt it. I mean, yeah, well, I call it ginger.
It is ginger. Yeah, but blonde hair, Lady Di, you know, Disco Di, and black hair, Charlie Boy, does not make ginger.
Right.
It does not make a pint of bitter. It makes a pint of mild ale or something darker. Yeah.
Snake bite.
Well, actually, it would be what's Guinness and lager called? There's a technical name for it, but not many people drink that.
Guinness and lager.
Yeah.
Guinness and cider's black velvet, or Guinness and champagne.
Yeah. There is no Guinness and lager. I mean, I suppose it's I don't know, 11 o'clock roundup, should we call it that? if you haven't got much money.
I've got friends whose the wife is blonde and the husband is dark and their kid's ginger or red hair. Is it not possible? I mean, you look at that image and I know.
You see, the red gene can be dormant.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you would have to find red gene somewhere in the Saxe-Coburg-Goethe lot and somewhere in the Spencer lot.
While we're on the subject of James Hewitt, I actually happen to know someone who knows James Hewitt very well, and this person has told me. Now, it's hearsay, so I don't know that this is true.
Yeah.
Right? But this person I know is reliable and watches this show, and they will be watching this, knows James Hewitt. And this is what they said to me. Like I say, I don't know if this is true. Yeah. James Hewitt believes Harry is his son.
Oh, wow.
So that comes from a friend of Hewitt. I read before there that you've got to be a descendant of James I if you want to have a claim to the throne. Now,
so that's divine right of kings, is it?
I don't know what it is. Well, it says it's
either him or Charles II was.
Act of Union 1800, which restates the provisions of the Act of Settlement 1701 and the Bill of Rights 1689. So, but apparently there's been some documents discovered in a Welsh church. This historian was telling me this, that George II had I'm not sure if he was married, but I think he was married before he met George III's mother, and he had a previous marriage relationship. We had children, and then, so George III shouldn't have become king. So he's an illegitimate king, George III. So everyone from that lineage down from George III is an imposter, and all of the real kings and queens of Britain, most of them are living in Wales. So they've all got a claim to the throne.
And the stone of Scone isn't the real one either.
Correct. Absolutely. No, there are people who claim to be direct descendants of William the Conqueror. There's a bloke live round the corner who says he is, and he reckons he should be the king. I mean, it just makes a mockery of the whole Lincoln. Right, now, something that's become very prevalent probably over the last decade is what's broadly termed celebrity culture.
Yeah.
I mean, do you watch any of these? I mean, you said you didn't have a TV, but I mean, do you follow any of it?
I know that these things are a way of business anyway. They are a way of getting the audience to participate and creating a brand based on maybe someone's singing talent, maybe someone's marketability talent. For example, Pete Waterman famously said that he knew his exact target audience was only little girls and gays, because he thought nobody else was whimsical enough to go into a shop and buy a single because they like the tune. I mean, I think at the time a vinyl single cost £2 or £3,
Yeah.
and a whole CD cost £5.
Right.
For example.
Oh, so it's like targeted to those specific...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but a lot of gays are, you know, quite extravagant.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. Is that they may use their money just to buy a single to have it.
Yeah, they're not ashamed, in other words, to buy a single.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And plus, I mean, I think the charts are decided by where people buy records, and which is not some little independent shop full of rare punk records from Ouagadougou or somewhere like that. It would be somewhere like Woolies, W.H. Smith's, Our Price, places like that. But yeah, Pete Waterman actually said that, and he said the marketing strategy was literally as narrow as that.
I mean, this is it in media. I mean, I've got no qualification in media, right? I produced this show. I don't know anything about media, like media studies and all of that. But I have obviously come into contact with people who are in the world of media, and like funding bodies. I've tried to get funding for my work in my show. I haven't had a penny off anyone, right? Done it myself. Now, but when I've gone along to try and get funding, you know, they give you these rules.
Yeah.
Oh well, you have to do it this way, Richard.
Or match funding.
Oh,
so you get 50% of the money from somewhere, 50% from somewhere else, and you have to somewhere along the way lie.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Because they'll only ever give you half.
Yeah.
I
need an agent, by the way. Somebody volunteer to be my agent, because I can't get gigs on my own.
What I was going to say, Phil, is I'm sitting there with these supposed experts in the media and say, oh, well, what's your target audience, Richard?
Which differential?
What age group are you trying to appeal to with this show? I'll say, well, I'm not. That's not the point.
It's right across the board. Well, anyway, your viewers.
It's not across the board or not. It's just information, which I think needs to be out there. So, period. Yeah. I don't give a monkey's what age group it is.
They want to know that for the sake of art, for the sake of advertising. That's what they want to know that for.
Exactly. They're thinking of money. They're letting the money be the thing which is controlling and influencing their art.
So they want to know its form, not its content.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they want to know what it's going to pull in, rather than go, this needs to be said.
Yeah.
Let's do a thing about that. And if we don't get a massive audience, bollocks.
Yeah.
So and they look at you like you've got two heads when you say, well, actually, I think you're wrong with that way of thinking, that philosophy. You know, but these celebrity programs, people love watching them.
Marketing people
love watching
swear
them.
down that what they do is an exact 100% scientific art. But the thing is,
did you ever see the Bill Hicks when he does the routine on marketing people? He says, is there anyone here who works in marketing? And he goes, right, I'm glad that you've turned up. He goes, because what I'd like you to do is kill yourself.
32 years old he was. Yeah. I mean, I have me theories about what happened to him.
Yeah. I think there's quite possibly some. I mean,
something nefarious. With very rare
Bill
disease,
Hicks.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Obviously, you can't prove it, but as you say, he was 32. He was an upcoming star, and his comedy was. It was absolutely
observation.
Yeah, but it was a lot of it was very political, Phil. Yeah, and it was right on the money, and. He criticised the first Gulf War, if you remember, very, very astutely. And I think that could have sealed his fate, frankly. Can you imagine if he was alive now, Hicks, talking about 9/11?
Oh, yeah.
With a huge following. If he'd had a huge... I mean, he was very much into the Kennedy assassination as well. Knew that was a conspiracy. He would have been a huge threat if he was still alive.
There are others as well. Yeah. I think Sam Kinison. There's another one of the same stable. I think he died.
Right.
I think that was cancer, not sure.
Right.
Yeah, there are contemporaries even now, but it's so underground, it's hard to find, you know?
Yeah. You're trying to get into the comedy circuit yourself, Phil, aren't you?
Yeah, I have a routine which is poems and jokes and one-liners and
the thing,
bits of Spalding Gray type.
the thing about poetry is, if it's probably easier to perform than stand-up, because you've got your poem to rely on, and you know, everyone's not expected to laugh.
Well,
at every
this
line.
is why I like to keep mine simple. People know, people are waiting for the rhyme or whatever, and they know the, you know, the prosodic feet of the poems. So even if they haven't heard it, I try to make it as accessible as possible.
So what's your? I mean, have you developed kind of a stage act now? What do you do? Do you do half a dozen poems with a bit of banter in between, or what?
Bit of banter in between. Some guitar when I feel like it.
So you have the guitar on you when you?
Yeah. Off and on. If I'm in the mood to do it, yeah. I just want to break the monotony. It's not very easy to do.
Right.
But really, yeah.
And what, you're available for?
Parties, bar mitzvahs, weddings, yeah. Just about anything. Anything interesting. Right. Even someone's retarded stag do, everything from that right the way up to cutting edge.
So you go to a stag do and like read some.
Give them what they want.
Dirty poems.
Smut. Yeah, whatever they want, you know. I mean, this time last year, I was offered one. I refused to do it because they only wanted to hear smutty things. And I thought, well, no, because smut is only a part of it. There's serious bits, other bits, observational bits. But now...
So you won't do just smut?
I've decided I will now. If that's what they want, I need the money. It's not against my principles to do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written them. But
so I think there's more demand for smut than say
it's
political observational humour.
Yeah, well, it's a universal, isn't it? You know, smut and belly laughs and yeah.
So have you got any plans for New Year, Phil? Do you celebrate New Year? I mean, I personally am as much a humbug about New Year as I am Christmas. Because as far as I see
I am maybe, because it's never what you crack it up to be.
Well, I can't get excited about an arbitrary line in the sand of time. You know, it's not.
It's nonsense. Yeah.
It's not really an event.
Yeah.
You know, the people are getting blind drunk, and
it's a milestone. I use that time to use it as a milestone and then think about things.
Right.
And wait till everybody else is drunk before I get drunk.
Right.
Yeah. So. And try and remember what they're doing, so you can, you've got a whole year's worth of the memories of what other people have done while you've sidled off home sober.
Right.
Just to do the same thing yourself on the 3rd or the 4th.
Right. But in an empty pub.
Well, that's true. Empty somebody's council house.
Yeah. All right, and Phil, well, thanks very much indeed for joining me on this year's Christmas show, and we get some
vigorous input. Thank you very much. Yeah,
and I hope you get some gigs in 2012. And it just remains for me to say, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night. Called The Poet and the Pub's Guide to Life.
Yes.
Tell us about that, Phil.
Well, this will be culled from my forthcoming book and e-book, The Guide to Life, which it's basically my guide to life.
So
love, the universe, serendipity, happiness, creativity, and lots of other stuff I only know half
stealing food
about.
from skips.
That's not stealing.
Right.
Well, it depends if the skip's on private land.
Yeah.
But there's going to be none of that because I can't do it anymore.
Right.
Most of the new supermarkets lock up their waste.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know that it's quite a big thing in the. Well, I've seen various TV programs about people who can almost live purely on waste, like the things that supermarkets throw out and that kind of thing.
Oh,
which which is one of your philosophies, to live on as little money as possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And other ways, barter and so on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's certainly things you can barter for food, and
Yeah.
things you can barter from, for food from farmers or such like.
All right, Phil. Now we come on to the austerity measures, which is loosely linked. And in the news this week, we had Jeremy Clarkson. Well, first off, we had the strikes, the public sector strike, national strike, and then we had Jeremy Clarkson make that remark where he said all these public sector workers should be shot.
That was actually gratuitous, I thought. If you look at the reaction from the other two, from the two English terms, and the best thing, it's the only way we can empower ourselves. I'm thinking of studying common law. A couple of years. It's either that or do me MA, which I'll get 2 years pay for doing that anyway. That's more to do with communications. But I'd like to do common law, at least part-time, so I can learn enough.
Yeah, viewers may not be aware that, but I was actually in the same class as Phil here in junior school, and how he came to be on the show was I stumbled across
Old school ties.
No ties here. I stumbled across Phil's MySpace site, and I hadn't seen him for 24 years. So I was reading his poems, and I happened to find them extremely amusing. So I set myself a quest to go and find him. So I'd heard his name mentioned in a bar in concert in County Durham. So I went trailing around all the bars that Phil goes to, and eventually managed to find him.
Yeah, it's just about all I belong to. I don't belong to any groups, or I don't go to the sports centre.
Right, yeah.
It was quite easy to find us.
Yeah. They rename them now. They call them Centre for Sport now.
Oh, is that right?
And they call youth clubs academies. All these different names and things. Yeah. So are you a fan of social networking, Phil?
Not really.
No? I mean, you've got a MySpace, haven't you?
I have got a MySpace. That was only for my own promotion. I suppose I have Arsebook and them. Those are mainly for my own promotion.
Arsebook. That's your word for Facebook.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't want to. I didn't want to breach their trademark.
Welcome to RichPlanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall, and welcome to the 2011 Christmas show. And I'm delighted to be joined by the Port and the Pub.
Hi, folks.
Otherwise known as Phil Atherton. And many of you may recognise Phil from his poetry.
Yep.
And the poems that I've inserted into the shows, they've had a very mixed reception. People either love them or they detest them.
Yeah. Well, some of those poems have changed. I mean, the ones from the first DVD were more, they were more sexual.
Right.
Now they're more political, still also sexual.
Right.
Please buy the next one. And they pull more punches. I suppose in some programs you had serious debate, and then you had a poem about hemorrhoidal discharge.
Yeah.
Fair enough, that doesn't fit.
Yeah,
I remember seeing that one.
A lot of people say that to me, it doesn't fit. But, when I was devising the show, one of the things I was trying to aim for was I didn't want people to know what to expect for every show. I wanted it to be unexpected.
Yeah.
But so what we've decided to do, because it doesn't fit, is we're possibly going to make another show. Give us your number and we'll ring you back. So that means they can then steer the debate to whatever they want. So they make the debate about, let's make it public sector versus private sector. Come on, let's face it. Public sector workers are essential. Private sector workers are essential. You make a decision when you leave school, don't you, Phil? What your route's going to be. And there's pros and cons in both of them. Public sector, you've probably got more security. Private sector, it's probably high risk, but you've got the potential of earning a lot of money, So there's, you know, there's pros and cons in both. They're different and they're both essential. So to make the argument, I call it a phony bone of contention. Yeah. They create a phony bone of contention and get everyone fighting in that bubble when the oligarchs who are really in control, they're not asking the right questions about the corrupt banking system. Right, now that we've sorted that one out. Yeah. About a year ago, I think, David Cameron announced this thing called Big Society. You were going to make a comment on that, Phil?
Well, yeah, he gave us a clue of how to beat his big society. If we can do what he says and get together and organise ourselves, we can be too big a society for him and bring about his downfall. Right. So we need 50,000 signatures, and then he faces a vote of no confidence.
Right.
And because this is a non-government with no mandate, I think that's the next thing to be aiming at, apart from teaching ourselves about common law and the finer points. I mean, you only have to buy a law dictionary for a couple of quid from the web or whatever, just firstly to find out what the terms are. The legalese rather than presenters, they weren't expecting it at all.
Right. And
what he said after about how people who commit suicide are selfish, that is really unforgivable.
Right. I'm not really that bothered by it. I mean,
he's looking for publicity for his book, you know, it's his sound bites for his new book.
As I was saying off camera, I think, as I do with many things that are in the media and blown up in the media, I think there's another agenda. On the radio phone-ins on that day, I heard on the BBC, Radio 2 and local BBC radio, the debate was, these public sector workers get paid enough, so how dare they strike? I'm a private sector worker and I'm not on strike and I get paid a lot less than them, I haven't got a pension like they have, etc. What I think they've done, and I think this has been done deliberately, they've made the debate about that, rather than what the debate should be about, which is about the corrupt fractional reserve banking system, which has created the problem we're in.
The deliberately manifested recession. Before we go into that, can I just remind everyone that Jeremy Clarkson is a public sector worker to the tune of almost £1 million a year, paid for by your licence fees money.
Yeah.
That is the biggest arch-hypocritical, you know.
Yeah, if he's working for the BBC, which he does, that's public sector, isn't it?
Absolutely. He'll have a gold-plated pension.
Yeah, a gravy train.
Stuck to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But as I say, for me, it's diversion. And I actually think that those phone-ins on the BBC, if you've ever rang them, you ring up and they say, "Can I ask you what your question is?" And you tell them the question, and then they say, "Okay."